Welcome back. Climate change is one of the greatest challenges for society. Since Elia Group is enabling and facilitating the energy transition, sustainability is already at the core of our strategy. But that's not enough. With the Act Now initiative, Elia Group defined concrete and measurable targets related to how we will embed sustainability in our business processes in the coming years. We focus on 5 fields of action. In a minute, they will be introduced by Olivier Faix and Katrien van den Borre. But first, let's have a look at a short introductory film.
A successful energy transition for a sustainable world. This is Elia Group's vision. But what does this mean in real terms? Our mission is to create value for society. We are keeping the lights on. We are decarbonizing Europe by delivering the necessary infrastructure and shaping the markets. We are innovating to meet evolving consumer needs and protect people's safety. To achieve our mission, we have defined a strategy which is based on 3 pillars of growth. The first pillar covers the regulated part of our business. We operate a sustainable power system and deliver the infrastructure of the future, integrating high levels of renewables and new types of consumption into our grid. The second pillar relates to new growth opportunities. As a company with a unique set of skills and a solid track record, we are well qualified to realize projects outside our domestic markets, like offshore developments. Finally, we want to develop new services that create value for customers across the energy system. By actively providing new digital interfaces and services to emerging businesses through projects like the Internet of Energy and our affiliate Rialto, we are demonstrating our leading role in the energy transition. But growth alone is not enough. From our vision to our societal mission and the entire strategy of the Elia Group, sustainability is at the core of each activity. This is what we ensure via Act Now, our program based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Act Now focuses on 5 dimensions: climate action, environment and circular economy, diversity, equity and inclusion, health and safety, governance, ethics and compliance. Act Now defines concrete ambitions for embedding sustainability into our activities. It ensures that we will continue to provide a service to society and meet our ambitious goals in a truly sustainable way.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before we deep dive into the various elements of our sustainable strategy, let's have a look at the wider societal context of sustainable development. The Green Deal is at the core of the European evolution and a real game changer, since we know now it's about the full decarbonization of all sectors. This has become in Europe a global sustainability policy that encompasses all sectors and all parts of society. You will see today how Elia Group's business strategy embraces sustainability and supports various dimensions of the Green Deal. Sustainability is at the heart of each cornerstone of our vision, our mission and our strategy for a successful energy transition for a sustainable world. We ensure sustainability in the way we operate our business. We find sustainability back in our business plans, daily activities, and so forth. Putting it at the center of all our activities keeps us relevant for society and is our basis for future growth. This is more than a sustainability strategy. It's our business strategy that is sustainable and makes us act now. Our strategy is organized around the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations that set a framework and a common language, setting clear expectations for the way we want to live on this planet. It helps us to work out and show how we contribute as a company to a positive global development. For us as TSOs, the United Nations goals lead to 5 dimensions we focus on: climate action, environment and circular economy, diversity, equity and inclusion, health and safety, and governance, ethics and compliance. They build the link between the global objectives and the internal company perspective. we operationalize our sustainable business strategy via those dimensions that give concrete guidance internally to ensure the right implementation focus within our everyday processes and activities. Our first dimension on climate action is the most impactful one. As a responsible corporate citizens, we commit to reduce our own CO2 footprint to meet the targets of the Paris Agreement. In the following slides, we will show you how we want to achieve this. Transforming into a sustainable business is not only possible, it's the only way to stay successful. But at the same time, it's very important to realize that as a group of TSOs, we are in a unique position to integrate renewables in order to drive decarbonization of the power sector. This is where we have our biggest CO2 reduction lever. The picture illustrates the completely different orders of magnitude. Connecting wind farms Arkona and Wikinger, for example, with an installed capacity of some 750 megawatts in the Baltic Sea and an annual generation of 3 terawatt hours, saved 2,250 kilotons of CO2. This is 50% more than our annual footprint as a company. These savings are, of course, not all on us, but they show how important it is to realize our grid projects. As mentioned in the first part of the Capital Market Day, we are fully dedicated to speed up offshore in order to save many more times our own footprint.
Thank you, Olivier, for having explaining us how we put sustainability in a wider context at Elia Group. And as you said, the essence of our mission as TSO is a successful energy transition leading to decarbonization of the power sector, which is facing high emission reduction targets. And this is why we facilitated integration of renewable energy via massive investment in the grid, via new market design and enhanced system operations, and why we support electrification of consumers and effective sector convergence. Why do we highlight that so much? Because, as shown in the left-hand side chart, the ambition of society is to reduce the footprint of the power sector by 233,000 tons of CO2 equivalent in 2030 in Belgium and Germany. And that is by far the most important lever. Furthermore, by being an actor in the systematic change towards greener society, we create financial value. As far as we are concerned, there are no trade-off between sustainability and financial value creation. Investing in our business has a strong leverage effect on the decarbonization of the European power sector. What you see on the right-hand side of the slide is that alongside our initiatives to accelerate decarbonization of society, we of course also take actions to decarbonize our own activities, even if the global impact is much lower. But this is our commitment to act as a good corporate citizen. Concretely, our commitment is to run a carbon-neutral power system by 2040 and to run our own activities carbon-neutral by 2030. Also, we are partnering with all suppliers to assess the footprint of our supply chain and better factor the impact of CO2 emissions into the decision-making process for new investments via an internal carbon price.
And now, Catherine, let's deep dive a bit into those objectives. First, we enable the decarbonization of the power sector via our grid development projects in order to reach 65% of renewables in the power mix in Germany and 40% in Belgium by 2030. Those are the political objectives. We will achieve them by developing our grids, by further developing market products that facilitate the integration of variable renewables, by upgrading our system operations for a renewables-dominated world. We also prepare our infrastructure for more electrification, another core element of the decarbonization of Europe. We assess the concrete electrification potential together with industrial players, such as, for example, Linde ArcelorMittal, BASF, and Total, who are active in our grid regions, in order to identify jointly the best possible way to supply their growing electricity needs. We assess together suitable locations for the setting of new data centers or hydrogen production facilities, as Stefan was mentioning, in order to speed up their deployment and ensure the system is ready to cope with that.
Indeed, but that's not all we do. In addition, we are also convinced it's not sufficient to fulfill our national plans. That's why we go for the extra mile. We co-develop energy islands with industrial partners, one along the Belgian coast and one in the Baltic Sea. We push to harvest quicker the offshore growth potential at European level. You just heard Chris and Stefan about that. This can lead to 20 more terawatt-hours in the system of Elia and 50 Hertz by 2030. That is an increase of 15%. On top of that, we help developing a new market design that is more consumer-centric and better takes into account the decentralization of generation units. We also see sector coupling has an additional possibility to integrate more renewables. We push for digitalization to allow for more integration of decentral flexibility. A smart way of charging electrical vehicles in the future would enable to integrate another 1.5 terawatt-hour renewable energy more in Germany and Belgium, for example. We run joint investigation with producers and consumers how to practically speed up the deployment of renewable energy. We identified suitable areas for additional RES, we streamline our grid connection processes, and we develop lean technical connection solutions. On top of the current growth, we want to integrate additional 15 terawatt-hours of clean electricity by 2030 in order to reach our objective of 100% coverage of the annual consumption of the entire 50 Hertz area by 2032. Now, Olivier will give a couple of examples to show how we plan to reduce emissions related to our activities.
Thank you, Catherine. Let's start with system operations and first power losses. They are a consequence of transmission of electricity. They constitute a source of CO2 as long as the electricity generation mix is not completely carbon neutral. The amount of losses over the lifetime of our assets has always been a key criteria in our grid design processes and decisions, where we explore all possibilities to reduce as much as possible the increase in losses. In absolute terms, losses will grow over the next years since we have to integrate and transport more and more variable electricity from renewables. Also, the amount of losses will increase. We commit to decrease the emissions associated to these losses by 28% in our control areas by 2030. We will do so by investing in assets with lower emissions, thorough impact assessments for each investment decision, as well as operational measures in maintenance and grid operation. In addition, we explore ways to reduce needs associated to ancillary services and redispatch. Even though these emissions are not on our balance, we want to continue to contribute to better processes with other TSOs, national and European, to get these needs down.
And let me continue, Olivier, concerning our own activities this time, and starting with mobility. We will reduce our emission by 90% by 2030. To do so, we have developed our technical capabilities to avoid part of commuting and some business travel needs. For the remaining part, we offer innovative solutions to commute to work. We also promote ecological business traveling, and we electrify our fleet. We manage the transition of all our fleet vehicles towards carbon-free alternative, also via the installation of charging infrastructure on all sites. Since a couple of years, we use high ecological standards for new or refurbished buildings at Elia and 50 Hertz. At our Montnoyer building in Brussels, for example, the electricity consumption was reduced by 40% and CO2 emissions by 45%, thanks to a green roof and the use of environmentally friendly materials. The roof was fitted with 4,500 square meters of photovoltaic panels. Our 50 Hertz headquarters in Berlin was awarded LEED Gold Standard as well as the DGNB Gold Certificate for its ecological design. For all our offices, we procure green electricity for the outstanding energy needs. Regarding the assets and on the assets that are insulated via SF6 gas, we will introduce SF6-free assets as soon as technically feasible. We will use SF6-free solutions for 50% of our upcoming SF6 needs. This avoids 30% of the projected emission increase by 2030 and 60% by 2040. We continuously improve our leakage monitoring and management to remain well below the target of 0.25% leakage rate.
And concerning the fourth element where we act as a company, concerning the value chain for new assets and construction works, we will increase our maturity for CO2 accounting from spent to category-based for 60% of our investment volume by 2023. This will allow us to reduce subsequently the up and downstream footprint in a very targeted way. We will set specific Scope 3 reduction targets latest by 2023. And we move from a case-by-case usage of an internal carbon price in procurement decisions towards integrating the ICP in all parts of our decision-making process.
Yes, and last but not least, we also match our emission reduction activities and targets with international approaches and frameworks. Against the frame of the new European taxonomy regulation, for example, the vast majority of our activities are to be considered as key enabler and catalyst for the decarbonization of the power sector. We are therefore confident that our grid development activities will qualify with the criteria set out in the new regulation. Our first reporting in 2022 will be crucial for the further financing of our CapEx program. We also use the GHG protocol to assess our own emissions in the framework of the Science Based Targets initiative, even if it does not value and sometimes even punishes the most impactful activities we as TSOs must do to speed up decarbonization of the power sector. We are committed to meet the SBTi targets in 2030. We are open to collaborate with SBTi to further develop the framework and to properly consider the activities contributing to decarbonization. And before we start with a second dimension on environment, let's see how it looks like in reality in all substations in Belgium and Germany, and how all people live sustainability in their daily work.
Ici, on est dans le poste de Stévin, qui est un de nos derniers grands projets chez Elia. C'est une installation vraiment critique et très importante pour l'intégration du renouvelable, puisque c'est le lien en fait entre les éoliennes offshore et notre réseau de transport. Donc, c'est vraiment essentiel pour ramener toute l'énergie verte.
Alors ici, on a toute une série de mesures environnementales qui sont très importantes. La première chose, c'est l'intégration visuelle du poste. Le poste est légèrement en dessous par rapport à la route et on y a apposé un talus. Le talus a deux propriétés, de pouvoir couper le bruit et la pollution visuelle et lumineuse, mais également, vous verrez qu'on a mis sur ce talus toute une série d'arbres et de pousses pour intégrer ça au mieux dans le paysage et dans la nature.
Donc en termes de durabilité, les transfos qui sont placés derrière moi sont aussi un excellent exemple. D'abord en choix technique, vraiment le design. On parle d'éco-design ici, où on a des transfos, où on a vraiment fait attention quand on les a choisis de limiter les pertes et donc de limiter notre impact CO2 pour le futur.
In 2020 hebben we eigenlijk samen met andere TSO's een brief geschreven naar onze leveranciers om hen eigenlijk aan te moedigen om eigenlijk groenere oplossingen te leveren. Zeer concreet, we gaan eigenlijk de milieu-impact gaan waarderen van het materiaal die eigenlijk in aanmerking komt voor het produceren van wat dat we eigenlijk nodig hebben. Ook de milieu-impact die nodig is voor het vervoeren van het asset die we kopen. Of de milieu-impact die eigenlijk gepaard is met de manier waarop we een werf uitvoeren.
Et puis on a les grands murs que vous voyez sur le côté ici. Donc c'est des murs anti-bruit. Donc le but c'est vraiment de s'intégrer dans l'environnement et qu'on ait le moins d'impact sonore possible. Donc c'est actuellement le meilleur qu'on a sur le marché. On a utilisé ici un bardage spécifique en bois. C'est le même bois qu'on utilise pour les bateaux et donc qui va être très durable et qui va bien résister à l'air un peu marin qu'on a ici.
Ich arbeite bei System of the Future. Bei System of the Future glauben wir an ein CO2-freies Energiesystem der Zukunft und wollen mit innovativen Ideen daran aktiv mitgestalten. Auf der einen Seite sind es die höheren und volatileren Energiemengen, auf die wir das Stromnetz vorbereiten müssen. Auf der anderen Seite müssen wir die Flexibilitäten, die wir im Netz haben, auch effizient einsetzen. Phasenschiebertransformatoren sind ein sehr gutes Beispiel für Flexibilitäten. Sie werden heutzutage schon bei Elia und 50 Hertz eingesetzt und helfen uns, die Stromflüsse zu steuern und noch mehr Erneuerbare sicher ins Netz zu integrieren. Aktuell arbeiten wir daran, die Kolleginnen und Kollegen in der Systemführung zu unterstützen und dafür setzen wir auf künstliche Intelligenz.
SF6 ist ein sehr wirksames Lösch- und Isoliergas, was wir bei uns im Netz an vielen Stellen verwenden müssen. Es gibt derzeit noch keine technischen Alternativen auf unserer Spannungsebene. Es ist gleichzeitig aber eben auch ein sehr klimaschädliches Gas. Im Rahmen unseres Act Now-Programms haben wir uns ja langfristige Klimaziele gesetzt. Wir wollen bis 2030 als Unternehmen klimaneutral werden. Hier haben wir eine 110 kV Anlage, für die es schon Möglichkeiten gibt, SF6 zu ersetzen. Und genau diese testen wir hier und sammeln Erfahrungen, sodass wir die perspektivisch eben auch auf höheren Spannungsebenen hoffentlich anwenden können.
Dans le futur, nous continuons à travailler sur ces politiques, à les faire évoluer. Un exemple, c'est ces fameuses balises avifaune pour protéger les oiseaux qui éventuellement traverseraient ces couloirs. L'idée, c'est de pouvoir baliser entièrement ces 300 km de lignes noires et c'est ce que nous continuerons à faire dans le futur. Une autre réalisation importante pour nous, c'est l'aménagement des couloirs pour plus de biodiversité. Donc, c'est-à-dire sous la ligne, nous avons aménagé toute une série d'arbres, de mares, de bosquets qui permettent une meilleure biodiversité autour de celle-ci.
Maintenant, Elia, c'est plus de 700 postes, c'est beaucoup de bâtiments existants, on a plus de 1000 bâtiments existants. Et donc le but aussi, c'est de rénover ces bâtiments et d'améliorer les performances énergétiques sur l'ensemble de notre réseau. Donc on parle de mettre des panneaux solaires, de voir si on pourrait couvrir une partie de nos besoins en énergie. On parle de pompes à chaleur qui pourrait aussi être une bonne solution. Ou encore de pouvoir connecter, raccorder une voiture électrique pour le futur dans nos postes. Donc améliorer l'isolation, ça c'est évident aussi quand on remplace une toiture. Je pense que c'est vraiment un bel exemple d'un beau projet qui a été fait. Si on fait le tour, c'est quand même magnifique aussi. C'était essentiel, c'est l'intégration du renouvelable, et donc c'est une façon pour nous d'y participer.
We just saw, Catherine, in the little movie, how environmental aspects are directly integrated in many of our daily activities. Our second sustainability dimension is related to environment and circular economy. We design our assets so as to first avoid the impact on environment, to second reduce it, and finally to compensate the unavoidable. However, we are very aware that grid development has a high impact on landscape, fauna, and flora. On the positive side, this also encompasses opportunities to act locally in order to implement positive measures for ecosystems and biodiversity. We go beyond our legal duties via increasingly co-developing ecological activities with local partners while combining efforts to reach a nice leverage effect. Local and regional eco-pool projects are often much more effective than compensation payments. Around 6% of the project costs of an overhead line go into our ecological projects. Our environmental activities reinforce the link to local communities. They increase our anchorage in society and the positive impact of our activities by co-shaping them with partners, with local society. Concerning our own properties, we ban herbicides by 2022. And we will be ISO 14001 certified by 2022 in Germany and by 2023 in Belgium. On circular economy, we are in a learning phase. And we set the foundation now to embed circularity and eco-design in our decision-making processes for new assets. We plan to further increase the level of recycling at the decommissioning moment of assets. This allows for a more efficient use of our materials. A few concrete examples and objectives. Power lines naturally affect bird life. We just saw that in the movie. For this region, Elia Group minimizes negative effects on bird life. Sensitive bird populations are considered very early on the planning phase of our routing of new lines. And in the current grid, we also commit to upgrade our bird protection markers, as you just saw, at sensible sections. We first identify these sections with NGOs. We set up a bird protection portal, for example, with NABU and BirdLife. And we run a targeted upgrade program for installing additional bird protection devices. At 50 Hertz, this means we're going to install devices on additional 120 kilometers of lines crossing special bird protection areas in order to reach nearly 400 kilometers in 2030. At Elia, the ambition is moving from today 44 kilometers to 200 by 2030. In forested areas, as you also saw in the little movies, we establish corridors for electricity lines. And for that purpose, we have developed the ecological corridor management, which is a way to minimize interventions and to run in an ecological way those new corridors so that natural habitats are created there again, while also taking into account safe grid operation. In 2030, Elia and 50 Hertz will both manage 90% of all forest corridors in a way to support biodiversity. For 50 Hertz, we go from 3,870 hectares to 4,150. For Elia, we go from 562 today to 1,150 by 2030. Two examples to give you a last little quick flavor on ecological activities we perform in our grid development project. Here you see, for example, that we have created a biotope network in Sülzetal. The measure establishes meadows and pastures by upgrading and preserving ecologically valuable areas southwest of Magdeburg, which is in Saxony-Anhalt, together with the local Cultural Landscape Foundation. Farmers in the region co-develop this measure with us and enhance biodiversity without stopping cultivation. We invest there 2.7 million euros. As part of the upgrading of the new 380 kV cable in Berlin, 50 Hertz currently performs the watercourse restoration in Charlottenburg Palace Garden, an investment of 579,000 euros, including oxygen enrichment, reduction of biomass in the water system, the creation of breeding sites for kingfishers, and habitat enhancement. The garden therefore gains biological diversity and contributes to quality of life and species conservation in the middle of Berlin. And already today, our transformers or pylons are close to 100% recycling rate. And this motivates us to investigate how to push the recycling rates also for all other types of assets we're having in our grid. Starting with logistics and spare parts management, Elia is exploring, for example, the use of 3D printing for the warehouse in order to increase the lifetime of our assets. And before I give back the word to you, Catherine, let's watch a short introductory video from one of our constructors on safety. in order to get the outside perspective on our safety culture.
Für uns als GE Grid GmbH hier in Deutschland ist es eine sehr gute Erfahrung, mit ELIA und den zugehörigen Firmen zu arbeiten. Die Anforderungen, die an uns gestellt werden in Bezug auf Arbeitssicherheit, sind hoch, die Erwartungen sind auch hoch, aber das unterscheidet sich in keiner Weise von unseren eigenen Anforderungen und wir erfüllen diese gerne. Wir müssen alle zusammenarbeiten an dem Thema und das Wichtigste ist eben, dass unsere Mitarbeiter und auch unsere Kunden jeden Abend gesund nach Hause kommen. Ich erinnere mich sehr gut an einen Vorfall, den wir im letzten Jahr hatten, ein völlig, also ich will nicht sagen harmloser Zwischenfall, aber auf jeden Fall ein Zwischenfall ohne Personenschaden. Und wir haben, oder die 50 Hertz in dem Fall hat uns zu 2 Meetings eingeladen, in denen wir den Fall gemeinsam analysiert haben, zusammen mit unseren Unterlieferanten. Und einfach um sicherzustellen, dass so etwas nicht nochmal passieren kann. 50 Hertz hat tatsächlich auch entsprechende Vorschriften angepasst, sodass es auf ihrer Seite auch nicht mehr passieren kann. Wir haben dasselbe getan, wir haben auch daraus gelernt. Und ich denke, das ist das Wichtige, was wir brauchen, dass wir von beiden Seiten lernen und es wirklich ein gemeinsamer Weg ist für die Arbeitssicherheit.
You have understood it. Our third dimension relates to health and safety. And as TSO, major activities are related to works at aids, work with electrical assets, and works in the maritime environment. Health and safety is not only an essential social duty of a good company, it also strengthens our license to operate and yields in our conviction to reach operational excellence. This is why we have a long-established safety culture. We do not only have strict safety procedures in place and run regular trainings and safety campaigns, we also enhance our technical and digital solutions to reduce the risks of accidents. We go for 0 accidents, not only for our own staff, but also for our contractors, as we just heard in the video. Our ambition is clear. Keeping our good track record even when rolling out or increasing CapEx program. To illustrate one of the KPIs we are tracking, you see our total recordable injury rate, currently at 5.1 on group level. This is reflecting a good industry standard, and we managed to stay well below a target of 8.5. As an example for an innovative solution that we are introducing in order to reduce the risk exposure is the high step system, which reduces risks significantly when climbing pylons. Another example to show how we create additional value for society while protecting our own people, we have an helicopter rescue service for offshore crews, which is also available for external partners and the public in case of emergency. Only last month, the helicopter has rescued 2 fishermen in the Baltic Sea.
Besides avoiding accidents, the physical and mental well-being of our employees is a big priority for us. We see our working environment is changing very fast. We need to make sure that our employees stay healthy, well-adapted and resilient in order to face all the challenges ahead. Here as well, this leads to operational excellence and ultimately to more efficiency. This is why we have established a successful preventive health and safety approach over the past years. Activities that are part of this approach are, again, amongst others, the provision of a broad range of external medical services, including hotlines where employees can place their fears and problems anonymously. We run regular pulse checks and employee surveys, as well as a regular sharing of group-wide good practices. To illustrate again one of the KPIs we are tracking, you see here our sickness rate on the slides with a good level of 3% as compared to well above 5% industry average. We are proud to be an industry leader here and are committed to keep our standard this high.
Yes. And to complement you, Olivier, let's recall that it's important to us to make mental health a subject of discussion. This is why we run preventive awareness campaigns and online trainings, and complement those initiatives with health and fitness apps. As you can imagine, making sure that all employees receive the best possible care during this difficult COVID-19 pandemic is a top priority for us. Encouraging home office and offering testing facilities in all offices was the first step. Now, we are mitigating possible negative effects of working from home, for example, through our Work at Home catalog, a step-by-step guide providing useful tips on ergonomics, on nutrition, work-life balance, etc. And to start with now our fourth sustainability dimension on diversity, equity and inclusion, let's have first a little look at some testimonials we collected after our last International Women's Day.
Hello, hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So when people ask me what is diversity for you, it's really easy. It's just believing in what we see in our own cities.
Diversity is what we see in the street, what we see in the world. So it's not that we have to have a transition, we have to adapt to the fact that it's a reality.
Only way forward today is not only looking at it from a macro perspective, but also from a micro perspective. What could you do as an individual to make your own environment more inclusive?
I would really advise each team leader to ensure diversity in the composition of the team.
And yes, the team spirit improves. Diversity means to be invited to a party, which is quite fair, but to be asked for a dance is a lot better.
In order to realize a successful energy transition, diverse talents and opinions bring our strategy, our solutions, our innovative ideas forward and implement them in an effective way. We have to ensure that there are no barriers for certain parts of society, unbiased recruitment, selection and career path based on equal opportunities. This ensures that we can attract and retain the talented people and unlock their potential to participate in the evolution of the Elia Group. Our group counts today 38 nationalities. This is an increase of 41% over the last 2 years. We see the benefits of being an international group. The exchange between different cultures and nationalities has enriched our way of thinking and acting at AGI, at Rialto, at 50 Hertz, and at Elia. And it's a key success factor to realize our growth ambitions.
Indeed, and we also enlarge the role of women play in the energy sector. We are conscious that the energy sector has historically been led by male technical expertise, but things are progressing. Today, we have reached a proportion of 22% of women in our group. Our recent efforts to further increase those rates have already borne fruit. In senior leadership positions, the number of women has increased by 7% over the last 2 years. We pay special attention on gender diversity, as you see, and we also focus on educational experience diversity in various entities of the group. Both are essential to deliver the right solutions for the complex challenges of the energy transition and the digital transformation. We develop a company culture keeping a healthy balance between work and life. Diversity and a healthy balance give us a competitive advantage while being more resilient, more innovative in delivering operational excellence. We also believe that we understand better the societal trends we are facing and that we are able to address the challenges of the energy transition in a better way.
And in order to embed our diversity charter into the whole organization, we have involved all important internal stakeholders, being HR, our employees, our leadership teams. The recruitment and promotion processes have been reviewed and adapted in order to lower the barriers at hiring and promoting moments. Specific trainings and workshops for leaders on inclusive culture for all employees promote our new leadership model, which has diversity as its core. Our ambassadors network of employees connects diversity initiatives into their teams, into the daily work. We also have flexible working scheme policies, parental leave, sabbaticals, and homework. They are key elements for a healthy work-life balance and to retain the best talents.
And let's now move to the fifth dimension on governance, ethics, and compliance. Good governance not only underpins confidence in the delivery of everything that you have seen today, but it is essential to give guidance for long-term and sustainable success. This means that we have an effective oversight from the board, we have strong internal controls, we have effective risk management, and finally we do audits to remain compliant with the legal and regulatory provisions and also to prevent fraud. All this contributes to more resilience, more risk mitigation, and more efficiency in delivering our activities in an effective manner. Besides the SteerCo of the internal Act Now programme, the members of the Elia Group Management Board are directly accountable for the implementation of our sustainability strategy. Part of the variable pay of the executives is linked to its sustainability objectives. We have introduced a group code of ethics providing a frame and guidance on group-wide behaviors. We have policies in place to ensure integrity towards contractors and suppliers, and I have set up a person responsible for anti-discrimination measures, anti-corruption measures, or human rights infringements that can be anonymously contacted.
And we will continue to give transparency and early stakeholder engagement a high priority, especially with local citizens, you just saw that, but also with association, market players, industry, consumers, and academia. This helps us to work best in the interest of society and to co-develop powerful solutions. Being open and transparent, engaging into a real dialogue with our stakeholders, not only strengthens our license to operate and our anchorage in society, it also increases the impact of what we do while using the intelligence of our partners to co-shape better solutions. This is why we, for example, have set up a scientific advisory and project board with academia to cooperate on interdisciplinary challenges, why we organize regular stakeholder days, why we do regular roundtables with industrial players, with NGOs, with unions, just like this Capital Market Day, in order to show you transparently and to get your feedback and suggestions for our future evolution. We are also supporting cultural activities in our regions. For example, we are partner of the Cultural Festival in Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania, of the Artist in Residence program of the Konzerthaus in Berlin. And we promote young artists with the Museum Hamburger Bahnhof. In social and health matters, we, for example, support the Solidarity campaign operated by the King Baudouin Foundation. We organized local sport meetings, and we developed for kids an interactive school exhibition on the energy transition. And more examples can be found on our annual report. However, we avoid supporting political and religious parties. In our grid development projects, we apply a systematic participatory approach in the same spirit in order to engage with civil society and local citizens. Each time we plan something new in the infrastructure, in the region, we collect and discuss information and suggestions via our dialogue tours. And that helps us to find the best possible routing and good technical solutions. And we complement these tours with digital formats for more interaction in public participation. In the same spirit of co-developing good solutions for society, we have set up the Renewables Grid Initiative, an association of now 11 European TSOs and 10 environmental NGOs that promote the necessary grid development to enable the growth of renewables in order to fully decarbonize Europe. An endeavor that we are looking forward to is evolving our reporting towards a value to society approach that illustrates better our contribution to the value we create for society the energy transition and the Green Deal. As a first step, we will develop our integrated reporting.
And now coming to our ESG rating, like you know, we have a few and they have improved over the past few years, and we will put our efforts in improving them further. We are really convinced that this approach benefits all stakeholders. This approach is profitable for society, for our customers, for our people, and for our shareholders. We are reducing our exposure to risk, we are becoming more resilient, and we are able to grow and create value for society and shareholders. We have seen that acting as a responsible company is valued. Sustainability has become business as usual. We choose to focus on sustainability as a key topic during today's event because we felt it was essential for the financial community to get more insight into and a deeper understanding of our sustainable business strategy. In addition to the more traditional information about our assets, our cash flows, our returns and investment pipelines, we wanted you to know more about our strategy, our concrete actions and contribution to global sustainability goals, our culture and mindset, also that you can better assess the value and future of Elia Group. We have also taken our first steps towards developing a sustainable financing strategy. In May last year, Eurogrid issued its first green bond for 750 million, the proceeds of which being exclusively allocated to 2 offshore renewable electricity projects, namely Ostwind 1 and Ostwind 2. The Ostwind 1 and 2 projects, which are co-financed by these green bonds, dovetail with the EU Action Plan on Climate Change. Elia Transmission Belgium also started its sustainability finance journey. In October, it signed a credit facility with a pricing mechanism which is linked to 3 sustainable performance targets. Those targets are related to 2 different dimensions: climate change and health and safety. Going forward, both Elia Transmission Belgium and Eurogrid will access the debt capital market independently to finance the organic growth. They will most likely take the form of a green bond or sustainability-linked instrument. The rollout of our sustainable business strategy today, therefore, marks another strategic milestone in terms of the benefit offered to all consumers and shareholders.
Thank you, Catherine and Olivier, for your comprehensive presentation on the 5 dimensions of our sustainable business strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions regarding this presentation, please do not hesitate to type in your question via the chat. Let's go live to Stefanie Leuten. Stefanie, what reactions did we receive so far?
Hi again, Marleen. Indeed, sustainability is a topic that is very high on the agenda for our investors. And as mentioned also by Olivier today, sustainability is not just a nice to have, but it's really crucial for our operations of our business, and we are fully committed to it. I can see we're in for a very interesting Q&A session.
Okay, that's for in half an hour. No. Yeah, sorry, continue.
Let me also remind you that you can ask your questions on the right-hand side of the Hopin platform in the Q&A tab.
Okay, thank you, Stefanie. We see you back in half an hour. In the meantime, I'll make some room for Yannick de Koning, who will take care of the 3rd part of today's event. See you soon.
Welcome back in part 3 of Elia Group's Capital Markets Day. We already presented our ambitions in offshore and our sustainable action plans. But how it is all be translated into financial outlook? Welcome back, Catherine. Welcome, Marco, CFO of 50Hertz. Marco, I believe it's already been a very intense month where you met a lot of our financial stakeholders.
Indeed, Yannick. Eurogrid just finalized successful issuance of 500 million euro bond at very good conditions. We thank our investors for their confidence in our business and in our strategy.
Indeed. Catherine, Elia Group's activities span over several countries. Can you provide us an update on the regulatory framework we are operating under?
Yes, so like you know, Elia Group encompasses 2 grid operators and 1 offshore connection with UK. 99% of all net result is generated by 3 different regulatory regimes. I believe we can say that the regulatory frameworks of our grid operations in Belgium and Germany are widely recognized as robust and supportive of the group's cash flows. Now, the relative contribution of each framework to the group result is quite different. The vast majority of cash flows comes from Belgium and Germany. In 2020, as an example, the German segment contribution amounted to about 50% of our result, whilst the Belgian segment contribution amounted to about 48% and Nemo-Link's contribution was around 2%. The group's exposure to different regulations allows us to diversify regulatory risks, which is by definition the key risk factor for any regulated utility. We have quite good visibility across the 3 regulatory frameworks for the next 3 years. In Belgium, a new regulatory period started in 2020, which will last until 2023. In Germany, it's exactly the same, with a regulatory framework also running till 2023. Lastly, the regulatory framework for Nemo-Link, which is our interconnector with the UK, is fixed until 2044 and is based on the cap and floor model. The profitability of this interconnector comes from the difference in electricity price between Belgium and the UK times the traded volumes on the interconnector.
Thank you, Catherine. So in the short term, the regulations are fixed, giving us a good visibility on returns and cash flows. But how do you anticipate on changes in the regulations?
Well, let me take you through the Belgian process, and I propose that Marco then explain the German process. And so I will first briefly touch on the current regulatory framework. Firstly, the regulatory framework is based on a cost-plus model with coverage of all reasonable costs, including all fair remuneration and incentives. Secondly, we have an embedded debt principle, which is applicable, meaning that all the cost of debt is fully covered by the tariff. So the rising interest rates we are observing today have no direct impact on the profitability of Elia Transmission. And finally, there is no risk on volume. Drops in revenue driven by lower electricity consumption due to lockdown measures, for example, are fully recovered through the tariffs. The remuneration consists of 2 elements: a fair remuneration, which represents a return on equity, and which is supplemented by various incentives being linked to the realization of operational objectives and the gearing ratio. The current regulatory framework leads to a net return close to 6%.
And how and when can we expect more clarity on the new regulation and hence returns?
Yeah, the timeline for the next tariff methodology will most probably be formalized at the beginning of 2022. It will be published on the CREG's website. The first step will involve the establishment of the tariff methodology itself. In these steps, the detailed principles of the methodology are defined, which Elia needs to respect when proposing different tariffs to be applied to grid users. Those principles include the parameters of the remuneration, like the calculation basis of the regulatory asset base, the determination of the return of equity, and the various incentives. It also defines the different cost types, controllable and non-controllable, and the regulatory treatment as well as the depreciation rates. Coming back to the return on equity, as the risk-free rate is likely to be an important parameter to set this return, the increase we are experiencing in interest rates could be viewed as a positive news for further return. A draft decision by the CREC on the tariff methodology is expected to be published during the second quarter of 2022. This will be followed by a public consultation, and a final decision from the CREC on the tariff methodology is expected to be finalized towards the second half of 2022. So today we don't have visibility on the evolution of the regulatory framework nor the return. And as you know, the Belgian regulatory framework has a track record of stability with a regulator committed to keeping costs sustainable and striking a balance between the interest of the TSO and the consumer. Elia will strive for a tariff methodology that takes into account the change years resulting from the energy transition with important investment in the grid infrastructure and the digitalization of the energy system.
Thank you, Catherine. Let's now have a look at the German process. Please go ahead, Marco.
Thanks, Yannick. Before I explain the process, I would like to remind you on the situation we are actually facing in Germany, as there are two different regulatory frameworks in place. A revenue cap regime for our onshore business and a cost-plus model for our offshore business. The framework covering our offshore regulation works in a relatively similar way to the Belgium system, with annual updates of the fair remuneration based on a 40-60 gearing, except that there are no incentives. The cost allowance mechanism differs as well, as the offshore costs are determined annually. If actual costs are higher than budgeted, for example, in case of a failure, they are recovered in the following year. Therefore, it entails a pass-through mechanism, with the burden shared via the offshore surcharge. In terms of our onshore operations, the costs are fixed every 5 years, based on a reference year in the middle of a regulatory period. 21 is the reference year for the next regulatory period, starting in 24. German TSOs can only apply for costs which really occurred in that base year. The corresponding cost data will be prepared and submitted to the regulator in June 22, and either be fully approved or partly approved with adjustments made by the end of 23 at the latest. Of course, this final decision will only be taken into several rounds of discussions between the regulator and the TSO. The approved file consists of the entire revenue cap, including costs and fair remuneration based on the RAB, and the gearing in the base year. The revenue cap is further adjusted annually by growth investments and inflation, with positive effects on the one hand, and individual efficiency as well as sector efficiency requirements are taken into account, decreasing the revenue cap on the other. The last two elements for 24 onwards will be set by the regulator in 23 at the latest. There's currently a legislative initiative underway, leading to a factual differentiation between OPEX and CAPEX in the future regulation, whereby for OPEX, base year logic will still continue. It is foreseen to update the entire asset base on an annual basis. This would reduce administrative burden for both regulator and 50Hertz, and will lead to a more stable cash flow from asset remuneration, putting 50Hertz at least in a comparable economic position as of today. The most important element will be the return on equity rate. The procedure for determining the regulatory return on equity is expected to be launched by the regulator during the second quarter, with a public hearing planned over the summer, while we expect the rate to be fixed in October this year. We are in constant dialogue with the regulator about the method and potential outcome. First indication can be expected at the end of June. In summary, the German regulator and the German regulatory framework is supporting and will continue to support investments, which is consistent regarding the challenge facing the energy transition.
So some key dates to keep in mind. Marco, thank you. Now, earlier today, Stefan mentioned future developments in the Baltic Sea, which will see new offshore wind farms being connected to our grid. Can you give us an update on the investment program in Germany over the next 5 years, Marco?
For sure. Well, for the next 5 years, 50Hertz plans to invest 4.7 billion. And this driven by the needed onshore grid expansion, as well as the construction of new offshore wind connections. Compared to last year's midterm outlook, this represents an increase of around 12%, which reflects in parts the preparation for the second 2 gigawatt DC connection at the end of the 5-year horizon, named SüdOstLink Plus. Due to the recent change in law, the construction of SüdOstLink Plus became mandatory. Through the realization of the CapEx plan, we expect the German regulatory asset base to grow annually by 8% over the coming 5 years.
Let us now have a detailed look at what the investment program includes exactly over the next 5 years and which projects can be expected beyond this 5-year horizon.
The planned onshore investments mainly represents AC grid extension, connecting onshore wind production slots to the load centers, like 380 kV power lines, Uckermark line and Nordring, as well as the 2 gigawatt DC cable connection towards Bavaria. The latter is also known as SüdOstLink or SüdOstLink, which involves an investment of 1.2 billion up to 25, and an additional investment of 500 million the years thereafter. Also, the renewal and capacity increase of the 380 kV diagonal power link running across Berlin is a major onshore project. It represents an investment of approximately 170 million over the next 5 years. All these projects have been started at Uckermark line and Nordring with the erections of the foundations. For the cable tunnel, recently the drilling has begun, and for SüdOstLink cable and converter has been ordered or are close to be ordered. From an offshore perspective, 3 offshore wind park connections are currently under construction within different phases. The wind farm connection to Baltic Eagle and Arcadis, 450, respectively 290 megawatt, also called Ostwind 2, are due to be commissioned between 23 and 24. Ostwind 3, 300 megawatt, is due to be commissioned in 26. Both projects represent investments of around 580 and 380 million respectively until 25. With these offshore connections, the total capacity on offshore will be almost doubled from 1.1 gigawatt to 2.1 gigawatt, and as such directly contribute to 50Hertz objective to have a total power consumption of 100% coming from renewable energy sources by the year 2032, like Stefan mentioned earlier today.
Okay, and which developments can we expect beyond this 5-year horizon, both onshore as offshore, Marco?
SüdOstLink Plus includes, beside the extra 2 gigawatt on the existing track on SüdOstLink, a prolongation that needs to be built on the north side. The technical solution has not been finalized, and the realization of this prolongation lies beyond the midterm outlook we provide you in the previous slide. According to current planning, the investment for this project amounts to approximately 2.2 billion, which will be mainly invested the period after 25. Like mentioned by Stefan already, the realization of Heide West Kleinrogan project will provide further strategic options to the group beyond 2030. Indeed, access to North Sea and or direct connection to 1 or 2 wind farms installed in the North Sea are tangible options to be further investigated and explored. This is of particular importance as the potential for further expansion of offshore wind projects in the German part of the Baltic Sea seems to be limited, even though there are a couple of concrete projects to be further elaborated and specified. From an offshore perspective, two nearshore projects named Gennaker 900 megawatt and Testfield 200 to 300 megawatt are seen to be feasible to realize in this decade. Both require specific legislation to be passed in order to be realized. In line with our sustainability program, we support this process, as our belief is that the energy transition needs to use all of the affordable offshore wind potential. Otherwise, Germany's installed capacity objective of 40 gigawatt by 2040 will be hard to meet, considering today's installation of around 10 gigawatt. This is one of the major reasons that lies behind our discussions with our Danish colleagues about new ways to exploit offshore wind potential in Denmark for use in Germany, in addition to Kriegers Flak. Such discussions have led to exploring projects like Bornholm Energy Island project, which encompass 2 to 3 gigawatt of installed capacity potential and will involve multiple connections between Germany and Denmark. The project is due to be realized within the next 10 years.
Thank you, Marco, for giving us a very solid insight into our German investment program and 50Hertz collaborations with you and partners. I think it's now time to look at Belgium. Catherine, how is the investment program looking in Belgium for the next years?
Well, like in Germany, our new CapEx plan for the next 5 years will increase by almost 1 billion, reaching 3.2 billion, which reflects our commitment to society to accelerate the energy transition. Through the realization of this CapEx plan, we expect the Belgian regulated asset base to grow annually by 8 to 9% over the coming 5 years. Belgium has the most to gain from an integrated European electricity system based on renewable energy sources, under which its full domestic potential is maximized and supplemented by electricity imported through additional interconnectors. In order to further prove our grid, our current CapEx plan is based on 3 key pillars. The first pillar, facilitating offshore energy, aims to accommodate the increasing offshore capacity needed to realize the sustainability targets. Under the second pillar, further cross-border interconnections will be established to integrate renewable energy at a European level, leading to a convergence in electricity prices, and this to the benefit of our industries. And under the third pillar, grid reinforcements to the network will be carried out to make the grid robust and reliable, which is another crucial step towards the establishment of a low-carbon society. Let me remind you that besides new investment, approximately 1/3 of the investment budget is linked to the maintenance of the existing grid. This maintenance CapEx has the same remuneration under the Belgian regulation than new investments.
Thank you. Now, let's have a detailed look at what the investment program includes exactly over the next 5 years and which projects can be expected beyond this horizon.
Yes, and so first, to further facilitate the growth of offshore energy, the federal government has begun developing a second area for offshore wind in order to increase the offshore capacity from 2.3 gigawatt to 4 gigawatt. Elia will connect further new wind farms in the North Sea to the shore. The total project will cost around 1.1 billion, approximately 50% of which will be invested over the next 5 years. Commissionings are due to occur in 2026 to 2028. Elia's initial plans for this project involve building 3 platforms to connect the wind farms. But like mentioned by Chris, those 3 platforms could be replaced by the construction of a multifunctional island as part of the recovery plan, which would not involve any additional cost for consumers. This brings us to the 2 other projects which make up the bulk of the 3.2 billion CapEx program, namely Ventilus and Boucle du Hainaut. Both links are vital for ensuring that all this additional energy coming from the North Sea can be brought to demand centers across Belgium. Firstly, the Ventilus project involves the building of a 380 kV voltage line with a capacity of 6 gigawatts in West Flanders. It will involve a total investment of approximately 750 million, 75% of which will be spent within the next 5 years. Another important grid reinforcement project is the Boucle du Hainaut project, which will reinforce the connection between west of Belgium and the center of the country. This project has a budget of approximately 650 million. We plan to spend around 1/3 of this during the current period, with the rest being spent after 2025. Finally, we have the Brabo project, which is essential for securing economic growth around the port of Antwerp and is also necessary for establishing a secure and sustainable supply of electricity inside and outside of Belgium. Over the next 5 years, we plan to invest approximately 85 million to complete the third and final phase of the project.
Okay, and which developments do you expect beyond that 5-year horizon?
Well, Yannick, after Nemolink, the Nautilus project is currently being explored, has a new hybrid interconnection that would link Belgium and the UK while also connecting offshore wind. The European Commission has already labelled Nautilus as a PCI, a project of common interest, marking its importance for Europe. Feasibility studies are currently carried out regarding the location, routing and capacity of such a project before the realization can be confirmed. Like Chris already mentioned, a potential new project that is not reflected in the figures is the hybrid interconnection with Denmark. A joint working group is now looking at the feasibility of the laying of this cable. It could become an important further investment for Elia, starting beyond this 5 years horizon, and would be Belgium's first interconnection with a non-neighboring country. And like mentioned earlier today, we expect that a number of similar opportunities will emerge going forward. We will explore those opportunities which will occur in markets beyond Belgium and Germany borders. The kind of technology and expertise that we have developed within the group will for sure become important for the further development of the grid in the North Sea and the Baltic Sea.
Thank you, Catherine. I think it's clear that Elia Group has strong prospects both for organic growth in Belgium and Germany. But what does that mean in terms of group-level targets? Can you give us some guidance?
Yes, let me give some operational targets and so giving guidance for 2021 and 2025. So the translation of the aforementioned CapEx program will lead to a total CapEx spend of 1.2 billion in 2021, increasing in the following years to reach an accumulated CapEx of 7.9 billion at the end of 2025. Driven by the realization of the CapEx plan, the RAB of Elia Group is expected to grow from 10.4 billion in 2021 to 14.4 billion by 2025, and so reflects an asset growth of nearly 30% for the coming 5 years, or around 8.5% annually. I would like to remind you that this RAB only includes 80% of 50Hertz and does not reflect our investments in Nemolink. As mentioned at the start of this presentation, our revenues are predominantly driven by our regulated activities. Today, we have visibility over the regulatory frameworks for the next 3 years until 2023. The moment we have more clarity on what to expect for the following regulatory period, we will share it with you, of course. Now, the primary driver of our regulatory framework are at the earnings level, whereas EBITDA and revenue are not including a lot of pass-through items. This is why we primarily focus on return on equity in our guidance. For 2021, we already announced we expect a return on equity of between 5.5% and 6.5%, and on average, between 6.5 and 7.5% as from 2022 until the end of the regulatory period. And I would like to highlight that this guidance obviously does not take into account any potential M&A transactions. Our conservative financial policy is unchanged throughout the group. Both Elia Group and Eurogrid continue to target a BBB+ rating with Standard & Poor's and aim to maintain a prudent financial profile through the upcoming CapEx program. In particular, the funding of the investment will be calibrated to ensure that both entities keep financial metrics at levels commensurate with the guidance indicated by the rating agencies. Eurogrid and ETB will continue to finance the investment program separately, independently from each other, with no co-financing activities between themselves. Both entities do not and will not support funding activities of the group and will issue and service their own liabilities through their own resources. Lastly, the dividend policy remains unchanged and is intended not to be lower than the increase of the inflation index, the CPI, in Belgium.
Thank you, Marco and Catherine, for this detailed explanation. That brings us to the end of this third part. It's now time for an extensive round of questions.